Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Coffee with Sales Engineers. I see that Peter has his tea, and on this one, I have my tea with my favorite mug, trusted
Trusted
advisor.
advisor.
So, super excited. Now, this is a different episode because usually my focus is to bring SE leaders, sales engineers that have had their amazing journey into sales engineering career. I'm excited for this one because we've got an SC legend on this podcast. We've got Peter Cohen, the founder of the second derivative and now the third edition of Great Demo, and also doing discovery books. Every time I've hired any new sales engineer into my team, the first thing I ask them is to read Great Demo and get the foundational elements of what it takes to be a great SC. Our intention is to bring these stories from the field to raise awareness for what a great profession it is. I know you're a big believer in sales engineering. So with that, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and then we'll get into some questions.
Hi, I'm Peter and I love pre-sales. Let's wind the film back. And in this case, it's truly analog film. Back to I've graduated university. I've done the mandatory youthful high jura to Europe, came back in January 1979, and I'm
Nice.
looking for a job. I got a degree in chemistry from UCSD, and I get a job at a place called Cal Biochem, a free biotech located on the hill of Torrey Pines, overlooking the Pacific, working in immunology R&D laboratory as a temp, believe it or not, originally, and then got hired on a permanent basis as a chemist, which should have been, and a function called product technical support, which was very intriguing because it was a combination of R&D projects, some personal projects, including but not limited to, I believe, the first person to successfully freeze dry beer. The primary focus for the lab was trying to determine what to do with bulks. If you've manufactured a batch of chemicals or clinical diagnostics reagents and it's not passing specs. The department that I worked in, the two or three of us, who had to say, this is trash, we have to throw it out and write it off, which is a big responsibility. Or here's what we can do to fix it. We've got to blend in more of this, that, or the other thing. Think of a restaurant making a big batch of mixture for French toast and something's not right with it. So it was my job to figure out, can we add some eggs and milk, maybe some brown sugar and nutmeg and make it sweet? Or is it got to be dumped because those eggs look really bad? So I was on the bench for a number of years, and it's actually my wife who said, you ought to contemplate going into marketing. And I said, wait a minute, marketing, you have to be kidding. Those people lie. They don't tell the truth. The lab is where it's at. She says, think about what you really love to do, which could be summarized by her as talking. But to net it out more accurately, I was doing the poster talks. You create a poster that describes your research or hypotheses or whatsoever, and you stand in front of it and people come up and ask you questions about it. I loved doing posters. I love doing presentations. My wife says, you ought to give this a try. And so I did. And I applied for a job in technical services. And I was hired as a technical services manager, which was a pre-sales role, doing demos, troubleshooting, supporting proof concepts or evaluations with reagents, instrumentation, and early software. And I loved it. By the way, I was a technical services manager with nobody reporting to me. That was just the job title. The next organization I moved to had application scientists and field application scientists, which is another role named for pre-sales. But I want to know, so that's how I was moved into a pre-sales role. So I'll jump ahead 15 years to 1998, where I founded a business unit as a vice president and grew it from an empty spreadsheet into a $30 million a year business and had about 120 reports. This is really interesting because the progression between those two events is what is possible for people who are interested in pursuing a pre-sales pathway. There's a lot of discussion out there about if you're in pre-sales, what are the options? And become an expert in certain arenas. You could go into sales, you could go into some of those other things. But I want to paint a vision that it's quite possible to end up leading a business with that kind of background if you're interested. My career pathway has been described by some people as like a stainless steel ball in a pinball machine. And they're right, because I was not interested necessarily in pursuing that first change. It was my wife who said, you should do this. And she also is the one who said that marketing is just a gateway drug to sales. And that was nearly every experience, every change in job was a ping. So I went from the lab into technical services management. I then joined a new software company as a product manager, um, doing hundreds of demos all through this time, going out in the field, working with salespeople. I was then banished to Basel, Switzerland for 2 years in a role that was a senior or principal pre-sales role. The actual title was called senior corporate consultant. My
Okay.
colleague Francis and I invented that title because there was no such thing before it.
Is to be banished too.
It was a delight, which was another thing I would strongly recommend. Going overseas or to another major geo, it gives you insights and perspective that you can't get when you, particularly if we work out of our home offices these days. And from there, I thought I was actually, while I was still overseas, they fired the local Swiss sales rep for a number of reasons. And they just said, Cohen, would you just mind taking over his territory? Just take it over. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, anything for the team. All of a sudden, I found myself swindled into sales while still doing the other role.
Hmm.
Coming back to the US, I thought they would promote me to lead marketing. And I said, nah, what you want, they told me, is a lot more sales experience. And I went, no, I don't. Really don't want to go into sales. They said, what we think you should do is take over the Western region sales for US, North America. And so I became your friendly neighborhood regional sales director for biotechs and small bits of pharma houses. This is the company I was with was making software for pharma research, chemists in particular.
Hmm.
And so I had customers in San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, and Boulder, Colorado. I hated using the word salesperson, but what it turned out is because of my background and because I was honest and really in it for the customers, they saw me as trustworthy and authentic and a trusted advisor. In that experience, I found that sales can be an honorable profession and began to really realize that my job is not to sell, but to enable people who really want to make a change in their practices and their results to help them through a buying process. And that's fundamentally what I was doing. Um,
Yeah.
During that experience, I realized that these biotech organizations were underrepresented in our overall users group. We had users group meetings annually in the US. People would all come together, see presentations from the vendor, but more importantly, they would see presentations on how other customers were using our tools and toolkits to solve and build all kinds of interesting applications. I realized, partly because some of my customers told me, that these are all the big companies. And so I said, great, why don't we start some local groups? And we did. We started local users group meetings. These started out as just half a dozen people getting together and chatting in each of those areas: San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, and Denver. That was an exceptional experience because today it's difficult to really get to know your customers. We spend so much time, but to actually go and visit their labs, see their organizations, have dinner together, to have a lunch together, to chat as a group, it's a meetup, but
Yeah.
it's a meetup with the customers and prospects. That was really illuminating. And so there's a
Yeah.
moral there. Get out,
Yeah.
go visit your
Face to
customer.
face, get to learn. People buy from people, do business from people, solving problems with people. So there's that human element of it.
There you
I
go.
I love that analogy because I think there's more and more of that. Lot of people are in their careers, take a complete 180-degree turn into a totally different profession. Your books have been an amazing resource, education for SEs that find themselves in the SE profession and they're going, okay, somebody's going to teach me how to do great demos. And there's a book that teaches me how to do that. I can learn lessons from that book and apply it. Should I go get your book and what would I get out of it?
Of course, you should get my books. Think of these books as time machines. They represent about 40 years of experience, hard labor, applied ideas, and what I learned from people along the way. This is a time machine where you've got nothing but fields of nuggets and pearls to draw from. It's entirely up to you how you want to learn. You can do it the slow, painful way, or you can accelerate the whole process and take advantage of what somebody has accumulated and shared. I will comment that the third edition of Great Demo and Doing Discovery take advantage of additional learnings about how to put together and release books that people can actually consume and learn the skills. For example, there's exercise, there's stories, there's axioms, there's little sides that illustrate things and help clarify points. But most importantly are the exercises. Because when you look at how people learn, what people tend to do is they read a book and they see something and say, oh, that's really important. That's interesting. They highlight it or put a sticky note
Mhm.
on it. That's because for reading a book, so you're trying to learn something, we only take away about 10% of the content in the book, 10%. So
Yeah.
that's why people reread books. That's why they put markers in and so forth. If you continue up that process, it turns out that people will remember about 30% of what is presented. When you actually put things into practice, that number jumps up to 70%. They are there to help you actually learn the skills by actually applying them. You can think about them all you want, but until you
Yes.
actually have to do it, you're going to suffer a low rate of change. By the way, there's a subtlety here. That number jumps up to, I forget what it is, 85%, 95%. It's way high when you actually have to teach somebody else the
Mm.
skill. Nothing crystallizes one's understanding of a skill or a topic or an idea like having to explain it clearly to
Yeah.
somebody else. There's a couple of thoughts. If you
Yep.
do decide to go through the books, if you're interested, send me an email or it's on our website as a blog post. There's guidance on the best way to consume the two. I recommend doing it as a set where you read part of discovery and then apply that to doing demos and then go back and forth with the various scenarios you encounter.
Now, Peter, you have had the influence on so many sales engineers in our industry, pre-sales, solution consultants, but also you've engaged with many of them. From your experience, are there three or four core things you've found that make a great sales engineer or pre-sales consultant, whatever title you want to call it?
There are three skills and knowledge pillars, and then there are a series of attributes that are particularly important. From the perspective of a hiring manager for pre-sales is looking for three sets of things. Number one is technical skills or technical acumen and tech stack acumen. That is related to everything about the product. What does the product do? How does the product work? What does it rely on? What does it integrate with? How does it integrate, et cetera? That's one pillar. The more you know about product space before you go to interview, the better off you're going to be. Um, you can watch their online demos. You could talk to other pre-sales people. Get
Mhm.
them to show you a demo. It's really difficult for a pre-sales person to say no to presenting demos. We still love to move that mouse. So that's number one, product knowledge and the tech stack. Number two is what I'd call situational fluency. This is how well do you understand and align to the market, the vertical, the discipline. So, for example, in my case, 162 years ago, you needed to be a chemist to support sales of the software. The software was storing and searching chemical structures as the 2D and 3D subgraphs. So you needed to know what a propyl people ether looked like. That's a joke for the chemists in the audience. You needed to have that level of situational fluency. You need to understand, how does pharma work? What is the overall workflow for discovering new drug entities? And today, what is the workflow for discovering and bringing biological entities to market? So if you lack that information or that knowledge, you either need to seek to acquire it, or you may need to say, maybe that vertical, that market is really not a good fit for me.
Mm.
So that's pillar number two. So number one is tech. Number two is situational fluency. And number three are the pre-sales specific skills. How do you do discovery? How do you prepare, present, and follow up from demos? How do you execute successful POCs? How do you identify success criteria for POCs? So this includes presentation skills. This includes many, if you will, customer facing skills, comfort standing in front of an audience, or in my case, discomfort standing in front of an audience, trying to make it look like I was comfortable. I will point out and comment for everyone in the audience, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. It's a real thing. You'll never get over it. I still suffer from nervousness before any type of a demo, a presentation, a webinar, standing up in front of a group of 1,200 people. But what I learned to do is to channel that nervous energy into the presentation or into the demo or into the conversation. So
Yeah.
those are the three pillars. So there are other qualities that hiring managers are looking for. And I'll list these and then we'll talk about them briefly. Problem solving skills, passion, curiosity, and the willingness to go a few extra miles. Problem solving skills. When we are younger, this is definitely perceived as a strength. Are you a good problem solver? Yes, I am. That's one of the things I think I do really well. And that is an important skill for pre-sales people because you're constantly solving problems all the time. Problems can range from the demo's not working. How do I fix this? To a problem where one salesperson wants me over here on Tuesday and another person wants me over here 30 minutes later on Tuesday, and there are two physically different locations, for example.
Problem solving for your customers, but problem solving within your role.
The problem solving in your role are often downplayed, but they're very important. And it has to do with how well you can work and play with the members of your team, and including sales folks, customer success, implementation, product, and so forth. But the other is problem solving for your customer or prospect. And that aligns to questions about product fit. One of the responsibilities of a good sales team, although it often falls to the pre-sales person, is to ask and answer the question, is this going to be good for their customer? Is this going to be good for our prospect? That aligns with fit. The less mature salesperson will say, it's a huge opportunity. It's a $1 million opportunity. And the pre-sales person says, yeah, but it doesn't really feel right. Why doesn't it feel right? It's a huge opportunity because they're not really doing the same kind of stuff the same way that our software does. You got to follow your inner voice there. This is where you don't just get to carry the mug that says trusted advisor. You actually have to step up and say, this is going to be a bad situation. This customers might buy, but they're going to churn. And when they churn, they're going to take 10 other customers away from us because they're going to talk about their negative experiences, for example. So that's a big problem solving exercise. How do I determine fit? How do I determine goodness of fit? And how do I communicate that I have reservations about this in a way action is taken on that? So those are problem solving attributes. Passion. You can probably detect in my voice, I'm a little bit passionate about things. Passion cuts both ways. But in my mind, I want somebody who's passionate as a hiring manager. I want somebody who's passionate about the products, passionate about helping customers get what they want accomplished, is passionate about trying to do the right thing. And I just can't get excited about apathy.
That passion is really relevant because buyers are looking to see how excited you are about your own product. How excited you are about solving and how much your product can solve their problems. Bringing that passion and your A game is needed in every engagement.
I'll give you an example, and it's what my old colleague Hank and I called the enormous amount of Chinese food story.
Okay.
We were doing trade shows, and at that time, the software ran in a client server mode, which is surprisingly close to SaaS. We brought the Microvax computer to serve as the host computer to trade shows. As we're setting things up in Chicago, we're watching a forklift unload a bunch of stuff for the booth from a truck. The forklift drives its forks through the middle of the box. And Hank and I are both going, because you could almost hear the sound of those forks going in this computer into Microvax, which is a box that was about, I don't know, 3 feet high, a couple feet wide, and a couple feet deep. So not real big, but just enough. And they unload this thing and we open it up and you could almost visualize its little legs in the air going twitch, twitch. And that was it. So we're looking at, this is all the software for the entire trade show booth, a 60 by 40 booth, a big booth. And we're like, this is like 4 p.m. in the afternoon. We rush over to our friends at digital deck, the people that made those computers at the time, and said, you wouldn't happen to have a spare machine of some kind. They actually did as a backup for themselves and they didn't need it. And we were selling moving a lot of our iron. And so we said, can we please have it? And we'll bring it back at the end of the show. They went. And we literally spent all night loading and testing that software and went through 3 rounds of Chinese takeout because it was the only thing we could get. And by 8 a.m., although we were wiped and we were dead, the booth had its software and everything was running. It was a highly successful show in Chicago.
You could
Yeah,
have
we
easily
could,
said, sorry, can't demo at the show. The computer broke.
yeah. The last attribute I wanted to mention is curiosity. Curiosity drives the willingness and the desire to continue to learn. One of the most important success attributes for anyone in a customer, I think anyone anywhere, but in particular, a customer facing role is curiosity. And it drives us to improve. It drives us to question things. But it had to do with what does it mean to establish a baseline? You're just looking for change over time. And the more data you have, the better. But if you establish a baseline where you're trying to track the outside temperature in the beginning of June, your baseline over the next several months is going to be way up here. And then
Yeah.
everything in comparison to that's going to be low. It's everything's low. My definition for a successful workshop for me personally included 2 sets of parameters. One is how well did the participants seem to apply, adapt, and begin to implement the ideas? On a very personal level, did I write something new down on a sheet of
Mm,
paper and take that out? It's like, oh, ooh, that's a really cool idea. I'd be right in the middle of a workshop and I'd say, ooh, let me write that down. And
yeah.
I would write it down on my laptop or a piece of paper. That for me was a measurement. That was the figure of merit of success is that I wrote something new down, something I didn't know before, something I wanted to try. Push yourself. Curiosity is one of the attributes that a hiring manager would look for. And I would urge you to, as you're looking for positions or you're looking to advance in positions, all those attributes plus the 3 pillars of skills and knowledge.
So let's dive into the next section of engaging with so many pre-sales engineers in your career so far. And you shared wisdom across what makes them great SEs. Tell us a little bit about account executives. It's a Batman Robin relationship. Are there things that account executives who work with their SEs or CSMs that work with the SEs or channel managers that work with partner SEs, are those people that are leveraging pre-sales resources? Are there few things they can do better in your experience? What have you observed?
First of all, let me give some additional history. When I was anointed or swindled, as I like to phrase it, as your friendly neighborhood Western Regional Sales Director, I had no salespeople. I had no pre-sales people. I was doing all the sales function things, which by the way, as I learned by doing it, that's a hard job.
Yes.
It's a hard job. It is a team sport. However, I was doing all my own demos. I was managing my own POCs or evals, as we called them. I was doing all the sales effort stuff, all the negotiation, license agreements, all legal stuff. All that was being done by a single individual. So I got a pretty clear understanding of the intricacies of the role and the interdependencies between the roles. And I did, in my mind, actually partition them. As I had some success, I was able to hire first a pre-sales guy because that enabled me to explore many more opportunities and customers, and then began to build up a team of both sales and pre-sales folks. When I went to the next company, we had a large enough team that we had to buy a CRM system. So I was running a business of 120 employees, sharing accounting with other business units, abilities to look at the perspective from being in pre-sales, supporting salespeople, being a salesperson, looking for support and help from pre-sales, being somebody who did both roles, and being a manager on both sides of the page, as well as a C-level manager. So number one, know your strengths and weaknesses and know your sales counterpart strengths and weaknesses. Discuss them
Hmm.
and align accordingly. You've got to understand who you're working with and then align and plan accordingly. Number two, you got to agree on your role assignments. So, for example, in demos, the salesperson should do the intro, which in great demo methodology includes reviewing that prospect situation slide. When we met previously and had a discovery conversation, here's what we heard. Please let us know if this is all accurate. The salesperson should do that intro. They should do periodic summaries and a final summary. They should manage the Q&A parking lot and be prepared to jump in as needed when there are anomalies. So when I was a salesperson with a pre-sales guy doing the demo, one of the hardest things for a salesperson to do is to stay shut up and let
That's
the
right.
pre-sales counterpart do the demo and
That's right.
and then give them guidance and help them improve afterwards and so forth. As this guy is doing the demo, and it's going quite well, somebody comes into the room from the back door. And I noted that as she came in, everybody else in the room turned around, looked at her, straightened up, and suddenly paid more attention.
Mhm.
And my pre-sales application sign, I got to a stopping place and I said, "Hey, John, hold up a second." And I said, "Hi." And I looked at the woman and walked in and said, "My name's Peter Cohen and you are." And she says, "I'm blah, blah, blah." And I said, "And what do you do for the name of the company?" She said, "I'm the CEO." And I said, "Many thanks for coming in. Is there anything in particular that you're hoping to see?" She said, "No, I just wanted to see what everybody else thinks." I said to John, "Hey, John, could you review the key ideas we've covered so far?" He did it quite well. And she was nodding her head. And you can see her thinking, "Oh, this is really good stuff. I got to get me some of that." Don't let that opportunity slip away.
Yeah.
When somebody new comes into the room or virtual room, find out who it is because it's quite possible or likely that it's a person in a position of power. And you don't want to squander that opportunity. Do a crisp summary of the important ideas presented so far, tease them to stay by letting them know some of the important things coming up.
Yeah.
But the point here is that was my role. That was my assignment
Right.
to myself in this case, which is to scan the audience, making notes of what's going on and help handle the anomalies. I would liken a demo meeting to a stage play where all the players on stage are contributing to the play. No, you are part of the play. Whichever roles are in the room, whether it's sales, pre-sales, implementation, customer success, senior management, you're part of the play. You're on stage. And as long as you're on stage, you need to be participating and making that play happen. In addition to demos, is doing discovery. One of the things that one of my sales colleagues taught me years ago, Carol Frischman, was to think in terms of business discovery and technical discovery. She was terrific. She was very good at business discovery. She was actually good at both, but she delegated the, okay, let's ask them about their actual day-to-day workflows. Let's ask them where
Mhm.
the blocks are, where the inputs come from, where the outputs go, what happens when things go wrong, what happens when things go right. That was my job. Her job was, where does this stand in terms of importance? What's your buying process like? Have you bought before? Is this something you're excited about? We agreed on what discovery information needed to be collected. That was number one. And that's partly what drove doing discovery book, because it's a lot more than, oh, look, they're bleeding and in pain. And then number two, we agreed on who's going to be pursuing which portions of information and even where some of the handoffs might take place if we were doing this together, which often took place face to face with prospects. I think I've got a blog post or two on that. I know I have some comments in the book
Yeah.
as well, but agreeing on the roles.
It's the account executives that put in the effort to align on the roles and have a discussion, talk with each other. If there are things that you don't like about the way your AE is performing, or if there are things that as an AE, you don't like the way your SEs are performing, just discuss those scenarios because it doesn't mean that you want either parties to change. People have different strengths.
We always want people to change.
Awareness of where those weaknesses are and figure out how you can work around them.
And on that, here's a subtlety. Most less mature salespeople don't want to be told how to do their job from a non-salesperson. Instead, what you do, so if you know that, let's take a simple example. You've got a less mature, so I'm trying to phrase, less mature salesperson says, "Hey, we've got this great opportunity. I just want you to show them the standard demo." You and I know that's not a good pathway to pursue. That's going to be a wasted demo. It might prolong the sales cycle, and even worse, it might turn them off. You
Mhm.
say, "Carol's extraordinarily successful. And she's been doing this at our company for 15 years. And she never has me do a standard demo. She says, if the prospect is unwilling to have a deep discovery conversation, show them a vision generation demo, just the appetizer. If that piques their interest, then they'll be willing to do some discovery.
Mhm.
After which you will be able to do a real technical proof demo based on what you've learned. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm not going to tell you
Right.
how to do your job, but let me share with you how somebody who always makes her numbers and always goes to President's Club executes her processes.
Right.
Why don't you follow what she does because of that? That's a mechanism that can work really well. Does that resonate?
Because this way you're not saying, hey, I'm an SE. Let me tell you how to do the sales job. And vice versa. There are sales reps that are very technical that have been with the company for a long time. It's easy for them to watch a demo or sometimes chime in and start answering questions. And I think a lot of SEs get peeved off by, look, I'm the technical expert here. If there are things I'm missing, as soon as we wrap up with the demo, give me
Yeah.
feedback. Unless it's complimentary, chime in. But I think it's a message well received. It is a very important relationship, and communication is the key.
You just reminded me of two things. One is a personality trait, and the other has to do with sales, pre sales relationship. How often do you notice when you're signing off from a Zoom call or a Google call or that the other person or you needs to have the last word, the okay, bye, hey, thanks, cheers, see ya. If there's a subtlety there, and if there are the people that feel like they have to have that last comment, are at risk of doing what is known as piling on when
Mhm.
answering a question or offering a capability. And you and I, we've both seen these in demos in particular, product presentations, where one party says, and the good thing about this is blah, blah. And then the pre-salesperson says, I can handle these 7 situations. And the salesperson says, and best of all is that they're going back and forth, adding, and there's no value after that second
Right.
exchange. That's a negative attribute. Find yourself piling on. You know what you have to do?
Stop piling on. I like that. It's hard because, like you said, most SEs and sales reps, if you're in sales, you like talking. So it's the hardest part to figure out when not to talk. I really appreciate you coming on. Your books have helped me be as successful as I am in my sales engineering career. They are the de facto resource for anytime I bring in a new SE on the team. It gives us a language that we can communicate. And I think even for people that are not SEs right now, but are considering, what a great way to read this book, learn about some best practices, quote some things from the book. It
Yeah.
it tells them you're not just excited about this profession because you know somebody who's a
Excited.
student. It's that you're actually taking this profession seriously, that you've already read the books. Highly
Today,
recommend doing discovery, great demo, grab a book, learn about sales engineering from Peter's books. Peter, I'm so glad we were able to spend this time together and bring some great wisdom for not just sales engineers, but people exploring sales engineering as a profession. Thank you for your time. Great conversation. Really appreciate it.
it's really my pleasure.